Hi, this is Dana, and on this channel I speak about spiritual warfare. I have another channel on astrology and the Facebook page on prophetic writings, which you will find in the description box below. Of course, the usual caveat, there are individuals who are using my identity, are impersonating me, doing illegal, fraudulent activity. Of course, I advise you to avoid them because they are just aiming to do harm on me and onto others by using my identity against me and against others. For this video, God has guided me to continue a topic, namely the one related to the timelines, but from a different perspective. And namely, God has guided me to talk about the fact that a timeline is a bondage, yeah? And we discussed in the previous video how you break bondage and you close a timeline, yes? Now, God is guiding me to talk about in this video about unfinished business in a timeline. Namely, now you broke the bondage, you closed the timeline in what concerns you. But there are other individuals involved in that timeline and in that bondage, yeah? And most probably, many of them, if not all of them, will not close the cycle, will not close the timeline for their own bondage because they don't break that bondage. Because many of them either don't do the spiritual fighting, or even worse, they are the one who created the timeline. They took upon themselves fake embodiments in order to create that bondage on you, to slander your name, to create fake narrative about you, and so on. So for this reason, they were paid basically in order to do this. They were compensated in one way or another, either that they received money or that they received a specific position, promotion, as for example, doing a fake embodiment of your counterpart, of your divine masculine or feminine. They receive some sort of reward. And if it is so, and they are enrolled in some sort of convent which decided to create that timeline against you, and they received a reward already for creating that, they are bound to some extent to that timeline by everything they done, by the darkness which they embraced and they summoned and they took upon themselves, by the vows they made to that convent, by the creation of that timeline, and so on and so forth. So God guided me to talk about that part of the bondage and of the timeline which does not depend solely on you. And to show that basically a timeline, even though you broke your bondage and you close that timeline for yourself, that can still be unfinished business if others from that timeline continue to reiterate the same bondage and the same embodiment, fake embodiment of whatever they chose to be. Some of them will choose to embody a mother figure for you. Others will embody a father figure for you. Others will embody your divine masculine or divine feminine. And there are endless options and alternatives for what roles they can play. Others can embody your boss, to be your boss. Literally, God has shown to me, they sign up and they say, I will help create this timeline against her if in this timeline I become her boss, or I become her lover, or I become her son. I've seen even that, people who claim to be your child, although they're the same age with you. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's just a spiritual symbolism of embodiment. So they can actually do that, although because they use different lifetimes before related to your ancestral line. And they say, in this and this lifetime, I was her son. So for this reason, I have rights over her inheritance and crazy stuff like this. I can never explain to you all the information God gave me about all of this crazy stuff which they do, because it will take too long. But for today, for this video's message, the most important information is that a timeline is closed in what concerns you. What does this mean? It means you broke the bondage, you exposed them, you took them to the spiritual court of law, you claim justice, judgment, and punishment. The divine court of law already deliberated, found them guilty, and is pursuing punishment upon them. Namely, you delivered karma. Okay? By that, you closed that timeline for you. As soon as you also heal from whatever wounds and darkness attachments they created on you. Yeah? So you do the spiritual fighting, you deliver the karma, you break that bondage, and you heal yourself. Hence, you close that timeline. But the timeline can be reiterated, even if you already did this. Now, it should not affect you that much, because if you went through all this process of bondage breaking and closing the timeline and you received divine justice, even if you did not succeed yet to take them to do proceedings in a 3D court of law and to actually have them locked up, still that means that you have learned your lessons and you have healed. So if this is so, regardless how many times they reiterate that bondage and that timeline, you shouldn't be affected by it, because you learned the lesson. You will navigate among their attacks, and literally what they do, they keep creating more karma for themselves. It will be easy for you to just claim justice, judgment, and punishment again. It's important that you notice what kind of bondage or timeline is being opened against you, and the divine realm will help you in this regard, particularly since you already won that spiritual battle. Will show you what is being done. They are trying to reopen the same timeline, either through the same individuals or with other individuals, taking the same embodiments upon them. And you just literally close it before it gets to affect you by claiming justice, judgment, and punishment on them. Yeah. So this is important to know, that by closing a timeline and breaking a bondage, as long as they do not get to be punished in 3D justice system, court of law, they still can attempt to recreate that bondage, to recreate that timeline again, either through the same individuals or through different individuals, new individuals who are willing to take upon themselves the same embodiment. Or there is another option in which, let me be very clear, in which, as I explained in another video, these individuals not only sent a lot of darkness to us, but they also sent darkness among themselves. Yeah, so sometimes they bind themselves one to another. Your enemies, what I mean, your enemies which are working against you, they also bind themselves against one another, you know. And when this happens, they pick up the embodiment or the karma of the other individual. I gave the example in another video, two individuals in my life. When I was very young, I was teenage, I was in high school at the time. And I had a boyfriend which later on became my ex-husband now. That individual swapped places with me as we were teenagers at the time. And he was working already with these convents with his mother, and they created these swamping places with me in order for all my abundance and all my fame and all my whatever to go to him. So he will be the center of attention, not me. Yeah. And at the same time, I had a colleague in high school who didn't even speak to me we had no relation whatsoever to each other. We knew of each other. I mean, I knew because I finished a girls' high school. So we were 40 individuals in class, and only 3 men out of 40. Most of the participants were girls, females. So for this reason, it was very easy for me to know of the existence of this individual, this man in another class, simply because there are just a few men in the whole high school. So I only knew he existed. I knew how he looks like, but he never spoke to me. I never spoke to him. Still, he binded himself at me, as at the time he was already part of a convent himself. And he learned about my inheritance, so he wanted to steal my inheritance. But when he binded himself at me, he didn't know that I have a boyfriend who swapped places with me. So he ended up binding himself at that man, which was my boyfriend, who swapped places with me. There's a lot of this going on between them because they are so focused on targeting light workers and doing all sorts of work with darkness onto them, that they don't always take in consideration that they might encounter a lot of darkness which others created on the same light worker, and they get entangled one with another. It's a crazy world, believe me. I have been researching it in order to untangle and to break bondages created on me, and I've been shocked every time when I discovered all of these details. Anyhow, the point is, they can either open the same timeline by choice, by choosing to take an embodiment upon themselves, or this is a very telling example. If such a situation happens where more than one individual binded themselves at you, which is very often, it's not so seldom as you would imagine, then they pick up the karma and the embodiment one from the other. So basically, even if you broke bondage and you already closed timeline with one individual, if another individual picks up his karma, will end up going through the same process and living the same timelines and the same karma basically as the other one. So you will end up with the same timeline being opened by somebody else, sometimes even unbeknownst to him, because if he binded himself at you and picked up somebody else's karma who was binded at you, then he will end up living a timeline which is opened automatically simply because he picked up the karma from the other guy. So it's a mad world. Basically, I think this is how you can sum it up. It's a mad world. Now, the purpose of this video is to let you know that this is happening on the background as you work to evolve spiritually and to walk on your path. This is ongoing on the background. Not to be discouraged or scared if you see this happening, and to understand that some of these are the results of entanglements between them, because there are many in competition with each other, and they are doing the same work at you, competing with one another, sometimes cooperating with one another. And please also let me say this, because sometimes they're just literally stupid and they don't even know themselves the consequences of doing all of this work. God has shown to me sometimes that even they themselves learn the consequences of the rituals which they performed through my videos, because they just are told by someone to do this stupid shit, and they don't really have the spiritual knowledge to understand what are the consequences of doing this, regardless of what you ask and what you receive. But then there is a payoff. Always there is a consequence, both for light and for dark. Always there is a consequence, and if you're not aware of it, then of course you will learn it from my videos. Okay, so the message is that of course, you break bondage and you close timelines, but at the same time, you must keep in mind that at any time, these individuals can reopen the same bondage, reiterate the same bondage, reopen a timeline. However, you must know that since you already went through that once and you won that battle, for you, it shouldn't be that complicated to observe the pattern, to understand which bondage is being recreated, and simply by claiming justice, judgment, and punishment and going through the same proceedings as previously, you will close that even before it gets to affect you. Yeah, this is important to understand. Also, because people should understand that the spiritual path it's not as easy and it's not as smooth as expected, regardless of how much God is supporting you. There is always, how should I say this, some degree of unknown and surprise element based on whatever these individuals decide to do. Of course, God also works through people. Of course, God will bring your way individuals to help you achieve certain things, or partners to work with, but those individuals, as I said in previous videos, will have to go through tests to make sure that they can actually carry on the purpose for which God brought them into your life. And some of them don't pass the test. Sadly, sadly and disappointingly, and sometimes very frustrating, but some of them simply don't pass the test. And this is a totally different topic to discuss, why they don't pass the test. Most important is for this video that you keep in mind the fact that of course you will win, you will break the bondage, you will close the timeline, and this will be resulting in an elevation for you, and of course continuation of your spiritual path, and so on and so forth. But be aware the fact that at any point in time you can witness a bondage being recreated, or timeline being reopened. And God is pointing out to me to remember that there are at least 5 vortexes on Earth. I already spoke about this, and that in each location you have identical identities, I would say. So they're copies, not copies, they're all originals. How should I explain this to be very precise? I have a prophetic writing in 2019 spring, which explains in May, I think, this. There are 5 vortexes on Earth, and in 3D, and in each of them you will find the same bondages created, the same spiritual fighters sent from the divine realm in order to break those bondages. So basically, even if you broke the bondage in one region of the world where you are located currently, you have to keep in mind that there are other vortexes and other copies of the same bondage, which maybe would be still ongoing. So as long as one of these bondages still exists, this is what God is showing to me. As long as one of these, any one of these bondages still exists and is not broken, and the timeline is not closed, they feed into each other, basically. They feed into each other, and you stand the chance to witness the recreation of the same bondage by that, because they feed into or from the other copy of the same embodiment in another vortex area. Yeah, I hope this is clear, because God just told me this now, so I was not prepared to talk about it. Yeah, so there are 5 vortexes. In each vortex you have exactly same identities, both in light and in dark. and there are the same bondages, the same timelines ongoing. And if you win the battle in one vortex, keep in mind there are still more vortexes in which the same bondage and the same timeline is still open, is still ongoing, it's still feeding. They are feeding on each other. Yeah, they are feeding on each other. So as long as the others exist, you must keep in mind that even though you broke bondage and you close the timeline, it is a chance that these ones will feed into another copy from another vortex area and will recreate the same bondage. However, I emphasize, since you already broke the bondage once and you won the battle, first of all, that is an advantage because you elevated, so you have a higher perspective. You already know the lesson, you already know the pattern. You will be able to recognize it and close it back immediately as it opens. So you will not have to go through the same type of spiritual fighting as previously. Yeah, when you break it again, it's just a claim of justice, judgment, and punishment, and you making the right choice because they recreate these bondages with the hope to trap you. But you will, the greatest advantage is that by doing all of this, you already know the pattern, so you recognize immediately, so you can dodge the bullet instantly with no effort because you already know it. Yeah, you have the advantage of literally having first-hand knowledge over that issue. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop here now. I think the message is clear. I hope so. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I will be happy to answer, either in comment section or now I will also have the community board open. So let me know if you encountered any issues with the storyline, or if you have any questions which I did not address related to the topic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.